Welcome back to the last drop of a splash of paint, where it's time to revisit Malcolm Cudmore as he finishes his wonderful pencil work.
Welcome back. I'm going to be doing a little bit of refining of my drawing now, and then I'm going to be working with my two other pencils, the white one and the very dark one, to really start to push some of my shadows in and pull some of my lights and reflected lights out. So I'm just going to make a little alteration to the drawing here. I've just realised that in the break I was able to notice that in fact I'd got some of the drawing just a little bit, lost a bit of the accuracy in the original drawing here. Sometimes, you know, the first marks that you make, even though they're quite intuitive, are often the most accurate ones. So, for example, I brought that point in the drawing just a little bit too far round to the right. Some of that I can adjust. This shadow here that helps to sort of define the way that her back curves, perhaps needs to be a little extended here. And I actually think I've brought her shoulders out of line slightly. So having got, that's a bit better. Once again, I'm still looking for larger, straighter lines if I can find them. I'm going to define some of the muscle in here a bit. Now, I am partly basing this on what I know is likely to have been there. As it happens, this is a regular model for the life drawing group that I go to, so I'm sort of fairly familiar with how her various curves and shapes go. So again, as I said, I'm trying to still find, where possible, the longest, simplest shapes that I can to define the shapes. And having adjusted everything just a little bit, I'm a little bit happier now. I'm using the electric eraser on this fairly smooth paper to just adjust everything a little. And as I say, some of these slightly messy outlines I may well be able to incorporate into a background. Now, you'll notice that when I was when I did the sketch originally, I noticed a couple of shadow values. So essentially everything that's been very quickly cross-hatched here with one tone of pencil, because this was just a graphite drawing, indicates everything that was essentially in shadow, caused largely by her own body from the direct light from the window that was coming in from this side. But also to help me begin to define actual shapes within the shadows, you can see that I've got some fairly dark shadows here. And I'm going to use for that another tone, another value. So, just in the first instance, I'm going to use this to mark in those things that I know were the shadows were at their deepest. Still quite loose. Still quite loose. There's a sort of shadow here caused by the elbow. It helps to define things, and this of course is quite dark in here. So having noticed my main shadow areas, I haven't actually noted it in this drawing, but I'm guessing that this side of her hand and her forearm must have been in more shadow than the back of her arm there. So just a bit of definition in here. Deeper shadow, always the heaviest, the darkest shadows, as things go further and further away from the light, is where the darkest shadow is. A nice dark shadow here. Back of the knee, because there's always a bit of definition and some contour at the back of the knee. There we go. Now, this part of her bottom of her left leg, was not only in the shadow side of the whole overall form, but also was in more shadow, as it were, from her own body. So I'm getting that in with a darker value, but there was a little fringe of light marking where the back of her heel was, and I know that inevitably there must be more shadow under here because there's a sort of tunnel under her foot. This part of her right foot was also quite deeply in shadow, and often when you get nice deep shadows, it's the deep shadow that helps to reveal a light shape in front of it. So I'm going to indicate that there must have been some shadow on the carpet in the life room here, so, and under the foot must have been quite dark. Now, again, at the moment these marks are really quite loose. I'm going to, I think this side of her hair must have been a bit darker. Now, so there's a little bit more value here where, there we go. So I'm actually just going to use my finger at the moment to just modify these a little bit, just soften the edges a bit, help move some of this value around a little bit so it's not quite so extreme. Just softening it a little bit. I don't mind getting messy. In fact, the truth be told, I actually quite like getting messy. So I'm entirely happy using my fingers. If you're not so comfortable using it, you can use one of these paper stumps. That can help you sort of just soften and move things around, make them a little less extreme, and blend. So the transitions between one kind of value and another are perhaps not quite so extreme. Just making it a little. All I'm doing is I'm just blowing the dust away because I don't want to push too much of these values in. So again, I shall probably modify some of this a little bit more, but just at the moment there's no real definition of her head here because most of it is in shadow, and there is always a nice deep shadow that sort of defines where they're. Now what's happening is, or where the hair ends I should say, be good help if I finish my sentences, and where the shadow is cast by that hair. Now, at the moment, all I've been concerned with is the sort of the darker values, but remember my paper already has a value of its own. It is a light to mid grey. I'm just going to soften this edge a little bit here. This is actually pushing the pigment that's left behind by this tinted charcoal a little bit further into the paper, which will make it a little harder to erase if I need to. Okay, just soften this a little bit. And now I'm going to be looking for places where the light is quite directly illuminating the form. And I'm sort of following the information that I've got in my original sketch, and trusting that my observations at the time were quite accurate. So if I've noted that there was a dark shadow in there, that's because there really was one. Okay, so let's see what's happening to the brighter light, and that's where I'm going to now use my white pencil, the third of the trois crayons, and I'm going to begin to so I'm now beginning to indicate where the light was directly, it certainly was fringing all these parts of her body. So what's happening now is I'm now really beginning to pull the light out of the paper. also using my imagination just a little bit here. But I know that because the light was coming from this side, it must have been brighter over here, and I can afford to be a little more generous with my white values. The light was sort of falling on the small of her back there, so it must have been quite light. So I'm happy to get quite a lot of light in here. I'm just going to soften the edges of this shadow area here. I don't want to obscure all of the grey paper because it is, of course, one of my values. One of my 3 crayon values and 1 paper value. So I know that there was quite a lot of light on this. This is an upper surface, the back of her calf. So it's getting more light than the underneath is. And the same with this side over here. There's a certain amount of light at the back here. There's a little more light on the top of the calf here. This heel is just slightly back and being illuminated along this back edge here. So there certainly was a bit more light there. I'm going to pick up just a little bit of reflected light, perhaps on that side, just to give it a little bit more dimension. And I'm now going to go back to my original colour because I'm pretty sure, and this is to do with experience more than anything else, the kind of core shadow here was probably a little darker and this is to do with how you perceive shadows more than anything else. So I'm going to give that a little bit more value in here. The same here. I think this probably would have been a little darker. And I'm also going to put that perhaps this finger was a little extended maybe, so there's a little fringe of light on the top here as well, and against this edge. Here. So this is partly a work of my imagination in addition to being based on observation. So I'm going to think that very likely there would have been some light on her hair here, which picks up, but I think the shadow underneath the hair will have been darker than I've allowed it. So I'm going to go back in again now with my dark pencil to redefine where I've noted in my original sketch things were a little darker. Really indistinct here. I don't want, with the greatest of respect to this model, I don't necessarily want you to be able to identify precisely who she was. And she's turned back to us anyway, so darker in here. I think there would have been more shadow around her elbow here. There we go. So a very quick version of a very old process of drawing form with 3 distinct tones. I'll brush this off a little bit, just hinting at the shadow underneath here and underneath here. There we go. And I'm able to do all of this because in my original sketch I captured enough information about what was happening to the light to enable me to develop it. And here we have a 3 crayon drawing, which I hope you enjoy. And I'll repeat again, if you get the opportunity to go to a live class, just say yes. Take some charcoal, a couple of pencils, a pad of paper, and sit in the corner and enjoy the opportunity that it gives you for drawing and understanding how light works on form.
Great stuff there, Malcolm. Well, folks, before we pack away today's palette and paints, we've just got time to answer a few viewers' questions. And remember, you can always email us at asplashyofpaint@saa.co.uk. Right, let's take a look at some of today's questions. First of all, we've got a question: what is watercolour ground? This is a medium, a relatively new medium, what lets you actually put a surface, like a primed surface, over anything. So, for example, a tin can, you could put this on first, and it allows you to do watercolour painting over the top of it, which is quite creative because it could be on metal, it could be on card, it could be on a wall, it could be on paper. Another question: how do I decide what to paint? Because it's something I'm finding quite hard. This is a tricky one. The more you do painting, the more you look at things and the more you realise that that will make a nice painting. But start simple, paint trees, lanes. If you want to do landscapes, you want to do flowers, just do a flower head. If it's something that you really struggle with, almost treat it in the same way as that you look at photographs when you're taking pictures yourself. If you think that'd make a nice photograph, it will make a nice painting as well. Or maybe look through magazines, holiday brochures, because they will give you some inspiration as well. We hope you've enjoyed getting closer to some of your favourite TV artists and that we've encouraged you to try something new. Join us next time for more inspirational advice and top tips to support you on your artistic journey. I'll see you next time.
Discover the colourful world of the SAA and bring a splash of paint into the comfort of your own home. Request a free copy of our home shop catalogue. Visit www.saa.co.uk for details.